Welcome to the Wild Type Podcast. I'm Lyssa Lizards.
I'm Neptune the Chameleon.
And we're your Reptile girlies. Back on another Tuesday.
Back to the podcast.
Was that like Back to the Future?
I don't know.
Kind of.
I have been on an 80s music kick lately.
Then that's
It's just been like when I'm working at work,
Yeah.
I've just been jamming to some 80s.
So you listen to music, not podcasts?
I listen to music and I listen to music with words.
Oh, okay.
Because just yesterday, one of my coworkers like caught me like bopping, like I had my AirPods in and I was like jamming and I was saying I listen to music and they're like with words and I was like, yeah. I'm like, whoa. Like, and I was like, it's kind of my superpower.
I have to I only ask that because like I love listening to podcasts, but I cannot listen to podcasts while I'm working or else I'll get very distracted.
Yeah.
So, and like I won't focus on what I'm doing.
No, I know a lot of people like can't listen to music at all or whatever, but like I've always been someone who like has a TV show in the background or like music in the background.
I do the TV show too. Because I've got like a little TV in my office and I'll listen to it, which is funny that I can watch like crazy.
But you watch like a lot of reality TV, which is kind of like mindless.
It's a little mindless. We'll get going on a whole different topic if I don't stop myself.
This will be a different type of podcast.
There is a lot of psychology in reality TV.
No, for sure, no doubt. But like you're not having to
and I can easily turn my brain off when I'm watching it, for sure. But yes.
No, I've been on 80s.
That's
80s
that's a pretty good kick.
Yeah.
All right. Well, today we have an episode that is all about something that some people have dealt with, a lot of people have dealt with, but some people have never dealt with.
Correct. Yeah.
Right? Because I know you haven't dealt with it yourself.
Nope.
But you have a lot of experience dealing with other people dealing with it.
A lot.
Yes. And I have experienced this myself. And we are talking about reptile thermal burns.
Yes. Yeah, I think we'll slowly over time work our way through common things like we talked about stuck shed. Yeah. We'll talk about thermal burns. Like, I think this is a really good topic. And, I mean, maybe we should just first start off with like what even is, people call them burns, but really thermal burn is like the more technical
the correct term. And this can happen from a number of things. I mean, it can happen from, under the tank heating. It can happen with overhead heating. It can happen with, all kinds of different things, but there are a lot of ways to prevent it. Mm-hmm. So basically a thermal burn is essentially what happens if you have like an unregulated heat source or even just a heat source that you don't realize is too hot for that species, because it's all very species specific, right?
Yeah. So the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, when we touch something hot, we go and pull back away from it. Reptiles don't do that. They will just sit there and cook.
And fry.
And roast themselves.
Yeah.
And so we're like, what? Why aren't you moving out of it?
Yep.
So a lot of times for new keepers, they don't even realize that this is something that they have to even be paying attention to. They assume that if it's too hot, then they'll move away from it, which is not the case at all, which is why we have to be proactive and make sure we are preventing any sort of opportunities for our reptiles to burn themselves.
Yes, and there are unfortunately so many.
Yeah. So I think, because I know we want to like get into all the different reasons, but I also want to encourage anyone who maybe hasn't experienced a thermal burn to like research.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what does a thermal burn even look like? Because the amount of times I've gone DMs, you've gone DMs of like a picture of a reptile and being like, what is this? And then having to say, that's a burn.
And quite frankly, from personal experience, like it's not always super obvious.
Yeah.
I mean, I experienced this with my panther chameleon Barney, and we'll get into the depths of like why and what happened here in a little bit. But when I first noticed it, I literally thought that it was just shed.
Yeah.
Because it was in the exact spot where he usually would start to shed. So it looked like he was starting to shed, and he hadn't shed in months. So I just literally thought nothing of it and allowed it to get worse without realizing it.
And there's a varying degree. There can be minor thermal burns, and then there can be severe thermal burns. So since you brought up chameleons, typically we see them in these dark patches, and it can be this teeny little spot on their side because they'll kind of turn to the side and bask that way.
Shift.
Common spots we see as well as like the tops of their head, especially veiled chameleons with their tall casts, and then along their spine on their top back, because again, that's usually what's closest to their heat bowl. But for snakes, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's super interesting. With snakes, it almost looks fleshy at first. And it's, instead of, like you said, with chameleons, it's kind of like a darker color and it looks like a dark spot or something. With snakes, it's more of like a pink or like a lighter color. So instead of it being darker, it's a little bit lighter, which is interesting.
So we would encourage you, for whatever species you have, just do a quick Google search of what a thermal burn looks like, so you can familiarize yourself. So if you end up seeing that on your reptile, you know what it is and can address it immediately.
Super important to start with that.
Yeah.
And just when you're doing that research, because obviously when you're, just Googling over there looking for, reptile thermal burns, you're probably going to get hit with like what it looks like when it's the worst of the worst.
Cases. Yeah.
So like, keep digging. And I know that's like hard to look at and it's hard to see.
Oh yeah, some are graphic.
But you want to be able to recognize what it looks like when it's like a minor one or a more severe. And when your very first Google search is just going to show you all the severe stuff. So unfortunately, keep looking, look for the minor burns, because those are the ones you want to be able to catch until it's too late.
So you already touched on some of the causes for thermal burns, but I know a huge culprit are heat mats, heat rocks. Those are biggies.
Those are real biggies. The heat rocks specifically, those were really big, I think, in like the 90s and early 2000s, specific for like bearded dragons, leopard geckos, things like that.
I don't see them often these days.
I think we've done a good job on the internet, guys, of scaring people away from the heat rocks. They are no good, my friend. But it's because especially those, they, have some kind of like a rock structure that heats up in addition to just whatever the electronic heat source is underneath. So like that surface of that rock can be even higher than the electric heat source was like intending it to be.
Got it.
Because it heats up that material as well. And it's just unregulated. You can't really use like a thermostat with it. Maybe you can, but it's just like, why would you use that instead of something else kind of a situation? And so it's pretty funny. I know a lot of people have been in my comments or in other areas, or even have just said to me in person, like, yeah, I use a heat rock, but I cut that cord right off. They just use it as a rock.
Decor. Yeah.
So some people will do that, but heat mats in particular, and I'm not going to say that you should never use heat mats, because I do utilize heat mats for quarantine enclosures. I do utilize it for, temporary setups or things like that. I mean, my African fat-tailed gecko is currently still on a heat mat, and that's because she's going to be moved into her big enclosure soon, and that is going to have overhead heating. But she's been on a heat mat for, a while, and that's not my preference. But like I said, I think heat mats can be utilized in certain situations, but in the grand scheme of like the type of heat you want to be using for your reptile, it's definitely like on the list of like the lowest. But
What's
the reason...
Oh, sorry. Go for it.
Were you going to ask what the reason was?
Yeah.
So the reason for that is basically because heat mats, they don't come programmed with like a max temperature, right?
Okay, because I was going to ask, how hot can heat mats get?
Insane.
Like crazy temperatures, right?
Insane. Like, I forget who it was. There was somebody a while ago, like years ago, that made a video where they just like plugged in heat mats and were using a temp gun to like see how hot they can get.
Yeah.
And obviously like on the heat mats, using a temp gun on the actual heat mat is a little bit inaccurate, just because the reptile typically should never be laying directly on the heat mat.
Yeah.
There's always going to be like a glass or some kind of substrate or something. So like it's not entirely accurate, but I remember seeing them getting numbers of like 212, like, which is literally like boiling. So they have heat spikes because there's nothing regulating them.
Right.
So if you're using heat mats, which in some situations you should, depending on hospital beds, whatever, like I said, you always, always, always have to be using a thermostat. And that is what is going to regulate that heat mat.
Because that'll cap out the max temperature that the heat mat will get to.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the thermostat is just going to help regulate that temperature. It gives it a max, number that it should not exceed. And if it does start to exceed that number, it turns the whole thing off.
Okay.
So that's how those work. And there's also, for overhead heating sources, there are dimming thermostats, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But for the heat mats specifically, they're just... unfortunately, for so many years, people didn't even know that you needed a thermostat at all. And I feel like only in the last like 5 to 10 years have thermostats become super commonplace.
Like required, not optional. Right. Yeah. Right. Is there, and this is me being a naive snake person, but is there a difference between the durability of like belly scales versus the top of the scales? Like, are the belly scales at more risk for burn than like the top? Like overhead heating, you still have a risk of a burn, of course, and would still need to be regulated. But
that is such a great question. Honestly, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Because I think it can just happen either way.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking in the wild, right? They have the sun and whatever, and like, yes, the ground does get very hot, and like they're not at risk for like a belly burn. But from a biological evolutionary, and this is just where my brain's going, right? I'm like, okay, the top part of them needs to be durable for the overhead sun, but then their belly scales may
be durable for the ground.
Yeah, may be different and not be adapted for heat versus the top of them.
The reason I'm like hesitating on the correct answer for this is because it's not the question that you asked, but the belly heat versus overhead heat is
that's a whole thing.
So that's what you saying, like the belly scales, like that made me think of that, and that's a whole other very
which is not
juicy
the purpose
topic.
Of this, and we're trying to limit this to just burns. I was just thinking from like an evolutionary standpoint, if like belly scales are different than 100%. The top scales and like whatever else. But
no, 100%. Yeah, I don't think there's a huge difference in like those two things just for that, but belly heat can be just as important, and you do want to kind of make sure that you're providing that with different heat sources, whether it's a heat mat or something better. So
for sure. So the thermostats is huge, the heat mats, heat rocks. Another one I wanted to talk about was seasonal changes. Because
That's
this
huge.
is something when I do my Chameleon consult calls, like we're in summertime right now, right? So people's home temperatures are going to be warmer than in the winter months. And every single call, I make sure to call out like your temperatures and humidity, right, will vary seasonally because once we kick on our heaters, that's going to pull all the moisture out of our air. When our temperatures in our homes drop and rise, like and seasonal changes.
And it's just so funny because like as humans, we don't really think about those seasonal changes because, we live in a home that is somewhat,
it's like,
maintained.
Minor, like probably 5 to 10 degree difference between.
So for us, that's like not a huge difference, but for the reptiles, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
So like you really got to think about that. And that is unfortunately what happened when my Barney got burns. And I can't remember if I've ever like talked about this really on social media with the burns that he got. I did definitely try to make videos that didn't quite show them as often, just
good
because.
Side. Yeah.
And they weren't horrible. They were definitely minor burns. They were not a big deal. But what happened was I had been utilizing the exact same wattage in the same house, and I always would change his wattage for his bulb just a little bit higher during the winter months. And it worked forever. It worked. Like he was like, I think 4 or 5 years old when this happened. So this was like towards the end of his life.
Yeah.
And I didn't think anything of it, but I had moved into a new house. And so I continued the exact same seasonal differences that I had maintained in my former homes and that had worked in my former homes. And in that new home, and it was a new enclosure, which was also my mistake. But that made a huge difference.
Yeah.
And it was way too hot. And I did not check it. And I checked it at, the branch level, but I didn't check it at the level where his, dorsal spikes were. And so that was where I made my mistake, was I made the seasonal change based on other aspects of the environment. And I didn't consider the aspects of the environment that were new that were going to impact that.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize, too, we only use heat bulbs if the temperatures aren't where they need to be. A lot of people who live in areas that don't have AC in their homes because it doesn't get that hot, if they get that heat wave and then their temperature in their home is 85, I'm like, you should not be using a heat bulb then. And this is for chameleons specifically, right? Because, every species has different temperature ranges.
Make sure that you know your species' temperature ranges.
Yeah, so 85 is arbitrary, right? Besides the point. But like it got significantly warmer in their home to the point where they didn't need that heat bulb. And so I had someone put a 50-watt halogen in there. I'm doing a video call with them. They measuring it. It's over 100 degrees. And I was like, what is the temperature in your home in order for 50-watt halogen to be over 100 degrees, like 6 inches down? They're like, oh, it's 88 in here right now. I'm like, one, how are you not melting in your own home?
Oh my gosh, I would fry.
I was like, turn off your heat bulb right now because you don't need it.
No,
right?
It's unnecessary.
Like, in fact, you should probably get like a portable AC unit and try and get that temperature.
Quite honestly,
down.
we need to make some other changes.
Right. So, but that, like, a lot of people don't realize, like, yes, seasonal changes, but also if the temperatures in your home are rising for whatever reason,
your ambient temps.
We are only using these heat sources to provide the proper gradients in heat availability for our species. But if that's already being met, then you don't need to.
Then it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. The seasonal changes are really important. Learn from me. Do not make that mistake because it was not fun. I cried for many days.
Yeah, you text me. You're like, is this what I think it is? And I'm like, yes.
I was so upset. That was
a burn.
So heartbreaking.
Minor. It's very minor.
It was very, very minor. But because it had looked like shed on his little dorsal spikes, it literally, I to this day, don't think I would have even noticed because it was so not apparent until it got worse.
Yeah.
Which is why I tell you to make sure you look up the minor stuff so that you know.
Yeah. Also, when you're measuring your temperatures, right, for those arboreal species, that it's not the temperature of the branch or the ledge or whatever. You have to factor in the height of their body.
Of the animal itself.
Yeah. Maybe that can bring up the next thing that we want to talk about, like babies versus adults.
Yeah, that was literally.
Is that the next one?
That was the next one.
Perfect. Because a baby that's 2 inches is going to be very different than an adult that's 5 or 6
Completely
inches
different.
tall. And those temperature in that 2 to 3 inch difference can be a matter of 85 and 95.
Can be a matter of a burn or not a burn.
Correct. And if we're talking about, say, like veil chameleons that have the very tall casque, a baby veiled has a little baby casque, and then the adult males will be like
huge,
giant casque, and that's even that much closer to the heat bulb. And the amount of times I've seen horrific, like where the casque has literally burnt off.
I've also seen that, and it's so heartbreaking.
Burnt off.
It's so heartbreaking. Those are the ones that I'm like, I don't understand how it can get to that point, and you have not gone to a vet yet.
Because people will be like, oh, they'll get out of the way.
Right?
Because it's hot.
Yep.
They'll get out of it. If it's too hot for them, they'll just move. They will not move. That's why it's on us. So you have to be mindful of how you set up a baby enclosure versus an adult enclosure. And same with like their UVB exposure and distances, heat, all that.
And I'm just thinking with babies in particular, and my brain is just on chameleons. Sorry, guys. We got a chameleon expert, and I also had one, so I think about them a lot. But with the screen enclosures, they'll climb up and literally
flip upside down.
They'll go upside down directly under that freaking heat bulb. And there is nothing more maddening than a chameleon that will not stop doing that.
Yep, little spidey chameleon. In that instance, you would raise your heat bulb up above the enclosure to not even give them that opportunity to do that. Are there any considerations where, like, I'm thinking geckos, there's not a huge growth difference?
No.
The same way for, like, chameleons?
So not so much the growth difference, but just, so, for example, this is kind of a random one-off one, but if you're going to be mounting your heat bulbs or any lighting on the inside of the enclosure, which a lot of people do, and I'm currently doing that for multiple enclosures, and there's nothing wrong with that. You just have to make sure that the light being inside the enclosure, specifically with snakes, you do not want any type of anything metal that could get warm that they could wrap themselves around.
Right. It has to be out of reach.
Out of reach, or have one of the heat guards, which is basically like a cage for the heat guard that won't get hot and won't be a risk.
Yeah.
So that's something similar to like little spidey chameleon. Snakes will also burn themselves getting wrapped up on a heat light. So you got to be careful with that too.
Totally get that.
So, but yeah, the babies, that growth is really big.
Yeah,
really
and
big
they grow
there.
quick, right? It's like a month or two later, and they've just tripled in size, and you didn't think to remeasure your temperatures.
I do think that baby versus adult size thing does just go for like any species, because even snakes, I mean, it might be a difference of an inch, but that's still a big difference. You should still be looking out for that anyway. Yeah. So I do think that matters for all species, but the arboreal species and chameleons in particular, it's a good couple of inches. So that's a big one.
Yeah.
But I think our next topic is essentially a combination of two things. A, overhead heating, and the fact that not all overhead heating bulbs are created equal.
True.
That is a very big one, and that is my second burn story that I've experienced, which is really sad. And it's not that bad. This is, again, a very, very minor one.
Yeah.
So I'm very lucky that I've like caught anything very, very quickly. But, you know, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard when it comes to overhead heating, the ideal heat source for overhead heating, and just in all honesty, any heat source in general, in my opinion, is halogen heating. That is like one of the, you know, it has more of the light spectrums that reptiles really need and that they would get. It more closely mimics, you know, the rays from the sun, all that stuff. So we've talked about that before. But there are different types of halogen heat bulbs, right?
Yes.
So there are floodlights and there are spotlights and there are even like LEDs and things like that. But I personally haven't used any of the LEDs, so I can't really speak on those. But the big difference to know is the difference between halogen floodlights and halogen spotlights. Because floodlights, the purpose of that is to essentially like project those light spectrums from that bulb across as much area as possible. And so it's flooding that light throughout as much area.
Surface area.
Yes.
Yep, totally.
And that is what you want. That is the ideal scenario. But when you have a spotlight, the spotlight is literally doing just that. It is spotting down on one specific concentrated area.
Yep.
And so it's a lot of concentrated heat into one smaller area, and that can very, very easily and quickly cause burns.
Yeah.
And so that is something that happened. My Hazel, my Hog Island boa, she's got a few little spots sprinkled on her. And like I said, they're very, very minor. I caught it very quickly and pulled that thing out real fast.
Yeah.
And even if you're using a dimming thermostat, because that is still a risk that you can face.
Sure.
Just because of the spot concentration, you can't always predict that even with a dimmer.
Yeah.
So that's just something you definitely want to watch out for.
One thing, so I have used LEDs, and one thing I do want to call out that like a 50-watt LED is not the same as a 50-watt halogen.
True.
Right, so a lot of people hear like, oh, you need a 50-watt bulb, and so then you go and get one, but not realizing that they're the same. A halogen is much hotter than an LED, because LEDs are supposed to be these very efficient bulbs, so they're not putting off a lot of heat. So a lot of people don't even use LEDs because they can't produce the temperatures that they need. Chameleons in particular, we don't need a huge temperature gradient. So like I can successfully use, say like a 60, 75 watt LED. If I threw on there a 75 watt halogen,
it would fry him.
Fry to a crisp.
Yeah.
Even a 50 watt halogen can sometimes push like 90 degrees, which is too hot.
Yep.
So I just want to like if we're talking, not all bulbs are created equally. From brand to brand, from type of bulb to type of bulb, from wattage to wattage. So you have to be very intentional, and you can't just be like, the last one I used was a 50 watt, so I'll just go pick up other.
Don't do that.
50 watt. Like,
don't do that.
As much time as you spend doing research on your UVB bulbs, you need to do the same for your heat bulbs.
There's a lot of big significant differences that make an impact, and you don't want to mess that up.
Yeah. So that's my just little caveat with like LEDs is like the wattage of them is very different.
Yeah, that is a fabulous point. So that's a big one. Again, learn from me. I have made stupid mistakes so that you guys hopefully don't have to. So I guess that like our next one is kind of nearing like the end of the reptile burns, but basically like everything that we've talked about up until this point has essentially helped, you guys hopefully learn how to prevent any burns. So what do you do when you actually have a burn?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
And it depends on how bad the burn is, right? If it's a minor burn, like in the instance of Hazel, did you even do anything?
No. It was just so made minor
corrections to the bulb,
and
right?
It fixed it quickly. She really didn't even have to heal because it wasn't even at a point where it was like fleshy. It was just the scales were a little discolored.
Right. So in that instance, you're good. Then you have probably the next level, which would be, I would say, Barney. Which is definitely categorized as a burn, but is still a minor burn, in which case people don't realize you can just use Neosporin. You just want to make sure that it's the one that does not have pain relief in it, which sounds counterintuitive because you're like, wouldn't I want the pain relief?
But their body, you got to remember, Neosporin is made for humans, so the pain relief in that ointment is for like a human body, not for a tiny little animal body.
So stick with just like the original formula, Neosporin. You can put it on there if you have a defensive animal, because I get this all the time, like you can't, my chameleon did it, whatever. This is what I would do. I would get a little Q-tip, put some Neosporin on there, wait till they're asleep. wait till they're asleep, and then just quickly go and get that spot, and then and if they wake up, they wake up, but that is going to be a way easier process than you coming at them with a Q-tip while they're awake and like coming at you, and or if you get nervous around, like that's totally fine. Wait till they're asleep. Hopefully they're towards the front of the enclosure, not like in the back. But that would be my suggestion.
And that's what I did. And it helped Barney's heal up very quickly, very nicely. And it was a great situation. So just make sure you don't get the kind with pain relief.
Yeah.
That's number one. There's also, what is it called? I'm going to have to look up the word because this is one that you'll need a prescription for. So this is definitely for more of,
more severe burns.
More severe burns. But you can definitely get what is called sulfadiazine cream. Did I say that correctly? We don't know. Sulfadiazine.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that you have to have a prescription for this.
Yeah. So you would go to the vet. They would prescribe you this cream. It is, from my understanding, just a more concentrated, more powerful burn cream than for the Neosporin. You do have to go to the vet. Not everyone has a vet available to them. And this is only in instances of those more severe cases.
Yes.
Then there's even the most extreme tier where there is visible flesh. Like it is an open flesh wound because the burn is that severe. It's burned through the skin, is now exposing flesh, in which case you 100% need a vet immediately because then you're at risk for infection.
Yep. And that's where it gets really scary. That's where they may not survive.
Yeah. So, or it could become necrotic, right?
And fall off.
Yeah. And so that's just stuff you don't want to mess with. Neosporin's not helping you on that one.
Nope.
So.
It's not going to cut it. Nope.
No.
So in some of those cases, your vet will tell you what to do, but in some of those cases they will have to cut off some of the necrotic flesh, things like that.
Yeah, or it'll just die off on its own, right? Those veiled casts that we were talking about earlier. Yeah, those just might fall off on their own. I will say most thermal burns do heal very well. It'll scar. Those scales won't come back. It's going to be a little Frankenstein-y.
Barney, towards the end of his life, most of his dorsal spines were still there, but he had lost, I think, maybe 4 or 5 of his little spiky spots, and they were just little nubbins. They weren't horrible,
no,
but they just weren't nearly as pointy as they used to be.
Yeah, they're not going to grow back. The scales aren't going to come back. You're going to have this discolored, scarred. I
still get sad thinking about it, and he's not even with us anymore. And I just I get so sad. He was so beautiful.
I know.
He was still beautiful even with his little scars, but
no, I totally get it.
It was heartbreaking.
Yeah, my dog Ember has a little lump from an accident that happened, and it's likely a permanent lump. And so I feel I'm like, you were perfect,
but now she's not perfect. You're perfect to me.
You're perfect, but you're. And because it's due to an injury or something,
I felt so guilty for so long.
Yeah.
I felt horrible. It just, that takes a toll on you. So definitely don't beat yourself up too much.
Yeah.
It happens to the best of us.
But just to set realistic expectations. They're not gonna regenerate and grow back and whatever, but they should be fine. They should be able to live a full life. Hopefully it's more cosmetic than it is true damage to the body, but
and usually it is, as long as you catch it early enough and do everything you can to prevent it, you should be okay.
And thermal burns are 100% preventable.
Completely.
It is on us 100% to make sure we are providing them a safe environment.
Yep.
We're being proactive. We're taking precautions because, again, they're not going to know not to coil up around that heat bulb. They're not going to know that this is too hot for me and pull back. So it's on us to provide them the correct environment.
And that's where the guilt comes in.
And it gets you. Just twist that knife.
I'll feel guilty about that forever.
I know. But this is true with all reptile care, right? Same with proper UVB, proper something. We gotta know our stuff to make sure that they stay healthy.
You'll never catch me doing that again. That's for dang sure.
Happy July, Reptile girlies. A new month means new deals over at our partners, Pangea Reptile. We are always so appreciative and grateful for their support of the podcast.
This month, for any of our bioactive girlies, we have some serious deals on Dalmatian mix isopods and papaya isopods. So if you're wanting a new cleanup crew or just looking to refresh yours, this will be a great option for that. If you're in the market for a new gecko, we have 15% off crested geckos and 20% off Saracen's giant geckos, which are so cool. Be sure to check those out.
Pangea always has deals going on, so head on over to PangeaReptile.com to shop their sales. But hopefully with this episode now you can go, you're like, oh man, I'm going to go check my
Another just pro tip, have a temperature gun. Make sure you're, checking those things.
That's something
we didn't even think about that.
So what you use to measure temperature, that's something we wanted to discuss. My pet peeve is those stupid analog humidity temperature gauges.
First off, yes, because they're inaccurate. In case you didn't know that, the ones that you like stick on the side of the wall, those are only good for your ambient temperatures, which means like the general temperature.
I don't even know how accurate they are at
measuring. It's not even that accurate. It's certainly not going to measure your temperature grades, like your gradients or whatever. Like it's not going to measure any of that stuff. So you got to be real careful with that. But also specifically for snakes and a lot of other species, but mostly I've seen this happen with snakes a lot, the adhesive. If snakes get up and wrap around there and they get the adhesive on them, it can rip their scales off.
Oh, yeah, no.
All kinds of damage. So just like don't use those. But the temperature guns will help get you that really specific like surface temperature. And so that is just a pro tool that every reptile keeper should have.
They're $10. So cheap.
$10 on Amazon.
And for any of my arboreal species keeper, keep in mind you cannot just measure the temperature of the branch. You have to consider in the height of their body. So give yourself, this is what I would say, like for male chameleons, we're looking for a basking temp of about 85, most species. So I'm like, okay, if the branch is 80, then you can assume that it's about 85.
About 5,
yeah, so about a 5-degree difference is what I have found between the temperature of the branch and the height of their body. But what's cool is if you can catch them while basking and they have regulated to that temperature, you can just put your little laser directly on their back and you can get a precise
use your little sniper laser and just get that exact number.
Granted, you have to wait a little bit for them to like get to that temperature, but they're cold-blooded, so they will be whatever temperature it is.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great tip.
So make sure you're using correct, accurate measuring tools.
Don't use the analog sticker ones. Those are just terrible.
Another we should talk about is power outages. Because if your power goes out with your thermostat...
Oh, geez, yeah.
Right? Because my understanding, I don't use thermostats, but if your power goes out and your thermostat goes out, then your heat map would be
not working.
Unregulated, right?
Well...
Or is that a concern?
If you're using a thermostat and your power goes out, it will just turn off completely.
Okay.
Which is better than nothing. So it just won't be usable at that point if your power's out. But I mean, regardless, you should just be, if your power goes out, you need to go triple check that and make sure that, it's all going to be fine.
Okay.
But I mean, just in general, it could mess it up to where, maybe it's not going to be.
Restarts to like factory settings or something like that.
Again, that's one that I think depends on like the brand or exactly which thermostat you're using and things like that.
Maybe I'm freaking out for no reason.
A little, but because like,
I'm just imagining like a horrific scenario where like somehow your thermostat just like glitches out and then
that is a very real possible fear.
I'm just getting a little like
no, but
about it.
But if your power goes out, then your power goes out and the heat map's not going to work.
Okay. But like if your power turns back on though, and then your thermostat because your power will turn back on sometimes without you doing anything. And
that's the situation where like if your power does go back on and it changes and whatever, like you can't always trust the thermostats because you don't always know.
So maybe that's what I'm getting at. Double check.
I've literally had brands that do that if the power goes out or something like that they just go right back to normal and it's already set and it's no big deal. But then I've witnessed some that don't do that and instead they just stay off. Okay. So it really just varies by brand and which ones you're using.
Both of those are safe scenarios. Yes. So
but regardless, double check. Okay. If you have power outages, triple check all of your temperatures. That should be like top priority.
Love it.
For certain.
So when we were talking about this, we knew we wanted to talk about social media burnout. And then I was like, we should talk about reptile burns and then social media burnout. And I thought I was so clever.
So clever.
So I think now's a good time to
switch
gears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
take it away.
What do I even start with this? Because I feel like this is just my whole life.
We've all been through it. Yeah. Is the gist of it. So this is for any of our social media content creators. And I know there's a lot of you who listen and tune in for the podcast. And if not, and you don't even create content, maybe this gives you a little empathy and sympathy for content creators.
That, but also I do think that people can experience social media burnout even if they're not
as
posting.
A consumer, yeah.
Even just as people who are just consuming the content. I mean, that's going to be exhausting as well. So there's definitely two sides to the coin.
Yeah, but like a lot of us as creators, and I think this is natural, right? Don't feel like the desire to post content, or don't feel like we're posting enough or good enough or whatever, and it just like the motivation for creating content is just minimal, if not non-existent, and then you're just going through the motions, and it's emotionally taxing, and it's not fulfilling. It's taking more from you than it is giving to you, and then it's a while, and then you recognize it, you're like, uh-oh, like this isn't sustainable. So how do you come back from that, right?
Honestly, there's so many things, because I've been through this so many times. I would say
I'm kind of feeling it a little bit right now, because I started my new job, and that just like the amount of brain energy that has taken is just so much. So by the time I get off work, I'm like drained. Ugh. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, completely. Now I got to turn my brain back on, and I have to use a different part of my brain.
And you have to put on a happy face and smile and teach people and educate and entertain.
I have made thousands of videos, also with very similar topics, right? And so that is also taxing to be like, and here's the supplements you need, and here's the UVB you need, and you gotta be self-aware and be like, whoa, time out, right? Like, feel that it's happening.
Yeah, for sure.
So one thing that I always encourage people to do is like take a break, and take like a true break. Like, you're not posting anything, you're not replying to comments, you're not checking your DMs, and sometimes for me, just 24 hours of just like a day to like.
Truly.
That helps a lot.
See, for me, I need a lot more time than 24 hours. Which is totally fine. Yeah. It's different for all of us. It's totally different for all of us. I've definitely taken 24-hour breaks before. It just kind of depends on like the level.
That's my just little like refresh, like reboot.
Yes.
If you're in like the thick of it though, then you might need a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever.
And I don't know. I personally feel like it's always like 110% burnt out or none for me. So
like, and we're off the deep end.
And we're done for like a couple weeks. For me personally, what I like to do when I decide like I need a break, I'm like spent, I can't do this, much more.
Yeah.
When I get a break, I have to actually like sit there in my head and think through, okay, how many days do I need to feel refreshed, to literally like, basically how many days do I need to take 110% off? And when I say 110% off, I mean, I'm not responding to comments. I'm not checking DMs. I am not posting anything.
Ghost mode.
I am not even thinking about new content ideas. I am not thinking about what I'm going to post when I come back from my break. I am not planning anything. I am literally not thinking about social media and how many days do I need in order to feel refreshed after that. And then I ask myself the second question of, okay, once I feel refreshed, how many days do I need to start coming up with new ideas, filming the new ideas?
But you're not posting. I'm not
posting, but I'm still working.
Yeah.
So how many days do I need to utilize that time, and how many days do I need truly off? And then that combined amount is my like break. But I know when I'm going to start like working on new content again.
Yeah.
Because that for me really helps me kind of like space it out, and really, because I will find myself in a situation where like I'll be like, okay, I'm going to take 2 days off. And then day 3 comes around and it's like, okay, well, I have nothing to post. So now I have to scramble to post, and now I'm stressed again.
Right.
So like I try to give myself the time to create and edit before posting, so that way once I'm like starting to post, I'm a little bit caught up instead of immediately feeling behind.
No, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Total sense. I think when you're coming back into posting, I think I've said this all the time, what is realistic for you to post? Because Dream World, you're posting every single day. You're posting on YouTube. You're posting on TikTok. You're doing answering all your questions. Like, would love to see it. That is not realistic for most people 100% of the time. And there's stretches where I have a good 3 weeks where I have daily videos and I am on it. And I'm like, let's go.
When I'm on a roll, man.
And then there's phases in my life, such as starting a new job. And I'm like, twice a week. I am so happy if I can post twice a week. But that is realistic. And if you can post more than that, amazing. But what's going to hurt you emotionally is if you're like, I'm gonna post every day, and then you don't, because then you're failing in your eyes. You're not meeting that bar that you set for yourself.
I am so notorious for setting myself up to fail.
I know. That's why we're talking about it.
I am so bad about this because I'm like, when I get back from my break, I'm going to be killing it. I'm going to be posting twice a day and it's going to be awesome. And it's going to be, nope, I'm going to fail on that every freaking time.
Especially if that's not your current
right.
norm, right?
You can't expect that to suddenly change.
No, it's like someone who's never worked out and then is like, I'm going to work out 7 days a week.
It's literally not going to happen.
For a week, but like that is not realistic to sustain for most people, right? Start out small, start out snackable, set yourself up for success. You do your 2 days a week and you're like, nailed it. You do that for like 3-4 weeks.
Then slowly add to it, slowly advance it.
If you want.
If you feel like you can.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's a really, really huge one.
Because that builds your confidence and then you feel like you're succeeding versus biting off more than you can chew. And this is true with setting any type of goal, right?
Oh, yeah.
Be realistic, start small, and then build on the momentum.
Work your way up.
Yeah.
Because we can very easily, speaking from experience, can get ourselves into this cycle of being excited, being passionate, getting burnt out, then getting anxious and stressed about it again, and it just goes and repeats itself.
And comparing yourself to your old self, because I know you do this as well.
I'm so bad at this.
Because there was a point where you were posting 2-3 times a day, every single day.
Yep.
With your
while working full time, all these things.
But with your current life and responsibilities, that is not realistic. And it's so easy to be like, but I used to do it. I know I can do it. But like, that's not realistic for now. And so it's so hard to compare. This
is literally one of my main topics in therapy.
It's so hard to compare your current self to an older version of yourself.
Especially also like, as your life is changing, as you're aging, as you're getting older, moving into different life stages, like things like that. Like, I can't do what I was doing at 22. You know what I mean?
This is so much more than social media content
so much
burnout.
More.
This is just like how to survive life 101 right now.
Literally, because I've been going through it, man. And this is like, I get this. We both do. Yeah. I mean, it is like just such a real thing. You can't compare yourself to what you used to be capable of. You can't set yourself up for failure. Like, that's the number one thing. So like, you have to, with social media specifically, set those expectations. And I think this is something that I am currently in the process of doing to like help and improve. I very much used to get myself in this rut of like, I would get kind of like what you were saying of like, your content can be somewhat repetitive if you have a niche and if your niche is very specific. And so you can get in this rut of almost like repetitive content or repetitive information. And like, you know, you got new trends, you got new, you know, editing styles, whatever.
It's same but different. Yeah.
Same, different stuff. I would get in my head where I would kind of beat myself up of like, it has to be educational. It has to be entertainment. It has to be, you know, things that people want to know, and I was so focused on posting content that other people wanted to see that I wasn't thinking about what I enjoy and what I want to be posting, even if it's not relevant to my niche or like what my stuff is. And that is something that for me, when I start posting stuff that like, I literally don't care if 10 of you watch it. I don't care. It was fun for me. I was proud of whatever that was. I was excited about whatever that was.
Such a good point. And there's so much more to that because it's like, why are you making content in the first place? And how are you feeling validated?
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so if you're chasing numbers from other people, then those 10 views are going to hurt. And you're going to be like, I'm not good enough. This wasn't a good video. Even though when you made it, you were so excited and so proud of it. So you have to recognize that your value and self-worth as a content creator is not reflective in the numbers because why did you make that in the first place? And if it's because you genuinely wanted to make it, that is reason enough. 0 people could watch it and you should be able to feel fulfilled because you just were able to create something.
I quite literally today, the day that we filmed this, posted a freaking fit check. A cute little outfit because I felt good in my outfit today. I was like, you know what? I want to share this. It doesn't have anything to do with anything that my followers follow me for. No, I don't care. I hope you liked it because I liked it.
Right.
And that's all that matters.
Right. Creating content
Yeah.
you genuinely enjoy versus content you feel like you have to make or what other people want, because then you're just like a little order taker and it's not something that's fulfilling, and that is also not sustainable. And that is also so true beyond just content creation. That is true of your job, of your relationships, of every aspect of your life. It has to bring you joy. You have to ask yourself, why am I doing this in the first place? And how am I feeling value?
Yeah. And especially too, for any of our content creators who are either already monetized or like getting to the point of monetization, the same thing, because you said, don't chase the numbers. And I think when you were talking about it, you were talking about like the views and the likes and the engagement, which is all well and true and 100%. But the same goes for the monetization aspect of it. Because like I would also catch myself, specifically on TikTok, in order for you to be able to like make money on a post, it has to be over a minute long. I would catch myself not creating content that wasn't potentially going to make money.
It also has to be over 1,000 qualified views. Right. So if you're not hitting that milestone, and if that's something that you feel is giving you value, is being able to make money off of the video, then if that number isn't hitting, then that can also take a toll. I get asked often, like, if I would ever consider doing this full time, and my answer is always no. Because I know, like, tying into this burnout, if I felt like I had to do this in order to pay my bills versus this continuing to be a passion and doing stuff that I want to do, like, you wouldn't post a fit check if this is how you paid your bills. No. You would post the stuff that you knew would monetize, that would make money, and you're like...
That fit check is sitting currently at like 500 views, which is not a lot for like my TikTok, and so I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
If you liked it, awesome.
So once content creation becomes your job, that is a very different... You're clocking in, you're clocking out. Like, this is how you pay your bills. So personally, as of today, I have zero intention of ever going full-time with my content, because if I don't want to post for a week, I can take that week off with zero guilt, because I can pay my bills just fine without it.
Yeah, that's so true. It's definitely, there's like the stats and the numbers for like content, and then there's the stats and the numbers in terms of monetization, and both can be equally heavy.
Yes.
And they can weigh very heavy on your mental state.
And how we feel validated, our self-worth, right? Yep. Like, I was able to make this much money this month, but I only made this much money this month or this month. Like, it is such a slippery slope. So again, you have to circle back to why you're making content in the first place. Yeah.
Just have fun with it.
Yeah.
Stop, like,
post the fit check.
That's literally like where I'm at currently with it, is I'm like, you know what? The other day I posted a cool taxidermy piece. I'm just posting whatever the hell I want at this point.
And you're being consistent,
and I'm
though.
Consistent for the first time in probably months.
And then you did the Love Island.
Yeah. I'm trying to mix in my reptiles and reality TV. It's like, you know what? I want my content to be fun again for me.
Yes. And that is what is sustainable, which is the whole point of what we're saying, is make the content you want, take the break, take the breather, and you just have to get to the point where you enjoy it. I mean, it's just because that's where it all starts, right? In the beginning, we all enjoy and love it. And then we get to a point where we are so burnt out that we hate it. And so you have to just remind yourself, like, how to get back to loving it again. And I do want to call this out. If you don't love it, you don't have to do it.
That's such a point. Also, you don't have to do it forever.
No.
You guys can best believe I will just vanish one day. I will.
Can we just talk about Jenna Marbles for a second? Pull a Jenna Marbles. You're like, you know what? I had a good run at this.
Peace. I'm leaving. Disappear from the internet forever.
The internet. But like, I think once you start content creating and you have followers and people are validating you of like, I love your content. I love your videos. I got this animal because of you. It's not fair, but we feel like we owe something, to these followers and these people, because they are invested and you have this relationship, and it's hard to not disappoint them.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to disappoint people. That's what I was going to say. It's like you don't want to disappoint people, and so you set yourself up again for failure because you're trying to meet the expectations of others.
But your sanity and your self-worth and how you want to spend your time is yours and yours alone. And again, this has nothing to do with content creation. This is true of every aspect of your life. If you don't look out for you, no one else will. And on the internet, honestly, you don't owe them anything.
Nope.
Not a single dime. And so if you get to the point where you're like, you know what? I had a really good run and I'm really proud and I feel like I made a difference. I made an impact. You were able to fulfill your why, your purpose, or you are numbers driven and you're just not hitting those numbers. You're like, you know what? This isn't worth it to me. Or you'd rather just spend your time doing something else. That's totally valid too. Like, there is something totally fine, totally okay with, and being like, you know what? I'm good.
Just know when to draw that line. Yeah. And I think everybody should just, pay attention to that. You just know that you don't have to do it forever. As long as you are still enjoying it, that is what matters.
I'll be curious because we are in this current generation of people who are content creators full time. If it's your job, either you're quitting and finding a different job or you can't quit because that's how you pay your bills. So I'll be curious to see who sticks around, not only in the reptile hobby, but just content creators in general.
Well, because, specifically in the reptile hobby, there are people who were very, very prevalent in the reptile community 5 years ago who are gone now. So it's like, I really do feel like we go into this, like, I would say every 5 to 10 years cycle of content creators. And I feel like in the last few years, we've seen a ton of incredible new younger content creators too. So it's like, there's all these new generations that keep coming up and the older generations are starting to, still fall in.
I'm coming up on 6 years for my YouTube channel. Right?
That's so weird. Oh, sorry. I just got so weird about that because, I remember you asking me when you were potentially going to do it.
I've been posting chameleons on the internet for 6 years.
You know what? I think I'm actually on technically Instagram year 7 because it was 2017 when I started posting as Barney the Chameleon. Yeah. And then,
that is a long time for near daily posts. Yeah. For very few breaks. Yeah. That is a lot of effort.
I have never put into perspective the amount of years that I've been posting on the internet.
A lot of posts. I have over 1,000 posts on Instagram.
Oh, yeah.
Thousands of videos on TikTok. Hundreds, if not thousands, on YouTube. So much content, but my why is to help chameleons. And as long as that is motivating me and driving me, I will talk about supplements as many times as possible if that means I can help, because that is my
that's
why,
your jam.
and I am so okay doing that. Yeah. The day that I don't have that passion anymore, or I'd rather just spend my time doing something else, I will archive my videos as soon as they become irrelevant, and I will say, thank you,
and good
internet.
Night.
Yeah.
You'll definitely catch me doing that one day. One day I will just vanish.
But sometimes we need that permission, and sometimes we need to hear it's okay to just not all hobbies, not all passions, not all jobs last forever, and that's okay.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. As long as you keep loving it, keep doing it, because I love seeing everybody's content. I never want it to stop.
Yeah. So that was kind of a little sad ending there. But at the beginning, we gave you some good tips on how to keep going. So hang on to that.
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit of a life therapy sesh, but
but I think everyone can take away one thing from that conversation.
Totally.
But just being transparent. We get it. We feel it. We've been there. It. We will be there again. We'll have to pull ourselves out of it. It
happens to the best of us. You're not alone in that. I can promise you.
Yeah.
So I think that is it.
I think this was a great
wraps us right up.
Reptile burns and social media burnout. I think that's great.
All the burns. All right. Well, you guys know the drill. Thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate y'all so much. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube, everything on Spotify as well. You can get early access in our Spotify description. Check all that out and give us a follow on Lyssa's Lizards.
And follow me, Neptune and Chameleon.
And we'll talk to you later, girlies.
Bye.